the Vegas Circle
right.
with Paki and Chris. And today, joining the circle, we're excited to sit down with managing partner of Wondour. It's a global strategic design and innovation firm. They've got the top 100 app in 85 countries, from my understanding. #1 Apple app over in Japan, and they've got over 18 million users. #6 utilities app in the United States. And we've got Taylor Speegle. So welcome to the circle, brother.
Welcome,
Thanks
Taylor.
for the invite, guys.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's finally able to put this together, man. We've been excited about this, man. We talked about it probably about a month ago. I talked with Dylan, and we've been excited to have you guys on, especially being a local business here in Vegas. But just kind of jumping right in. So you and Dylan were actually in a band together, from my understanding. That's how you guys actually met?
Our first memory of each other was me like walking to our mutual friend's house, and then me being in Dylan's house, and I was like playing piano, and he was playing drums, and our other guy was playing guitar. And then we actually ended up forming a band together. And then Dylan and I, over the years, because we didn't find too much success in the band, but we did have offers of like buying songs for it was like $100,000 to buy one of our songs. And as we got into the business side of the band, we noticed that he and I think exactly alike. So, our lead singer was exactly the epitome of a lead singer. And then, kind of the rest of the team. But he and I really bonded over that experience and approaching it like a business. And we're both very like-minded in that sense and kind of analytical in that same way. And so that then, transitioned to, I went off to college. I came back in part because of the band.
Okay.
We had one of those offers that were on the table. So I moved back from LA after graduating from college, and I was doing banking consulting out there. Came back to Vegas, ended up working for a company, Allegiant Airlines, Legion Air, based here in town, as my responsible decision, layered on with the band decision, of course. And then that didn't end up panning out, but Dylan and I spoke so much about that, and we were just kind of hooked on the idea of creating things, right, and creating values. And so we actually started in the tech side, with our own mobile app idea. So it was bordering on maybe 2 years after the App Store launched, and then we were trying to think like, well, I have this app idea, and then we're like, oh, well, how do you build an app? I have no idea.
Yeah.
And Dylan's background is in design. He did commissioned artwork, and mine was coming a lot more from the business side. It was business marketing and finance, and so we just kind of combined forces and figured out, okay, how do we actually create a mobile application? We figured it out, and then as we started to build our next application and found more and more success, we then started getting people asking us, well, hey, I saw that thing you posted, or I downloaded your app. I have this idea. And it started with, really startups and people with just sitting on ideas that started coming to us first. And then that graduated to, kind of mid-sized companies, and then large companies, and now multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporations. And we still work with startups, and we still work, with multi-billion-dollar companies. And so we consult, we build mobile applications, virtual reality applications. Really, we're building kind of blockchain apps. We've worked in the crypto space. Web, obviously, is fundamental to everything. So we've worked on kind of everything in between, and we've just done it now. We were our own serial entrepreneurs, and then we started working with other companies. And so we've now worked with dozens of companies or dozens of our own ideas. And so we're then able to take that process and just apply it to the medical space and apply it to a mobile game, and now a lot of work being done in virtual reality. And so we've just kind of applied that over time, and this is where we are today.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So really neither of you kind of came in at a perfect time, right? When the App Store is launching is like the perfect time to kind of have these ideas that are, seems to be instrumental to the success that you've, been able to achieve. But it doesn't sound like neither of you had the tech background per se to where to be able to develop these. So was the beginning stages more kind of aligning the pieces to be able to create these processes and create these apps, less so than trying to, figure out how to code and learn those steps?
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of playing to our strengths. And neither of our strengths were kind of on the development side. If anybody was a developer, it would have been Dylan, but his time is much better spent kind of where he does. We actually partnered, one of our early partners was a guy named Travis Morgan. He was based out of Las Vegas as well, and he was actually running the tech team for an app startup that was doing quite well. We kind of inspired him, and he, I think, went through an acquisition or an exit, and then he came over to work with us. So he was kind of the third prong of that, representing the development side. And so in the early stages, we worked a ton with him, and then we built a team from there with all of that development expertise. And from my perspective, it's just learning just enough to understand the pieces, how to recruit the right talent, building the right culture of that. And then we've been able to then diversify that, because right now we have an incredibly variable workforce. A lot of our workforce is contractor-based for a very clear reason of specialty. The amount of specialty that's required across our projects is vast. It doesn't make any really core business sense to have this huge overhead. If we try to accommodate the specialty of everybody we're going to need in the next year or 2 years, you're carrying an overhead that's like 3-4 times the amount you actually need.
Makes sense.
But if we're working on like geofencing for drones, I mean, that's not something we're working on every day. So we've worked with enough people or know enough people who know enough people that we're able to find really top talent, bring them in for 3, 6, 12 months. And then once that specialty is done, they might step back in their role or so on. So that's another piece, is being able to be really dynamic, because it really takes a team to build any specific application. You really have to invest on the design side. It's the UI, it's the UX, it's the branding asset. There's front end development, there's back end development, especially when you get into some of the new technologies. There's not enough knowledge base really right now, so there's so much discovery. So you have to find people that think in an innovative and creative way, that are comfortable with ideating. Which is really where the fun is, right? You have to be comfortable with it. You have to really be comfortable. If you want to truly innovate, you have to really be comfortable in the unknown. And that's where Dylan and I spend so much of our time, is just in the unknown. We trust our process, but usually our products are innovating upon something. There's some sort of novel feature or combination of features that just haven't been done before. So it's not a copycat kind of scenario. We actually have to figure out creatively what to do and how to implement it correctly, and then iterate on that even after you launch a bunch. So it's really working up and doing that process.
That's a lot of hats. a lot of hats to wear.
Is.
And when we were talking offline before, so you're originally from Las Vegas. I didn't realize that. So
from 10 years old.
Okay, excellent. So you guys, was the original goal to launch a company in Vegas? You guys always was the goal here, or were you guys looking out of state to do that? Or?
It was really more about building the idea, and we were here. So it's kind of the happenstance of it. Is we were all here. Las Vegas is our home. We love Las Vegas. Especially, I mean, it's just exciting because even from when we started to where it is now, the incredible community that's been built up, even the last, especially as you guys seen, like the last 12 months, it's been fantastic, and it's kind of been a fun experience for us, because we usually kind of operated in a silo. Las Vegas, I would say, from my perspective, Tony Hsieh did incredible things at Zappos, but from a tech community standpoint, it just wasn't there, or wasn't really sustainable. And so we kind of were living in the silo as a technology company, building apps, like ranking, we're beating ESPN's app. And like I remember when like that day happens, and we're like climbing the rankings, and you kind of turn around and you high five yourselves. But there wasn't really the Las Vegas community that was consistent for us.
Yes.
But we've seen a tremendous change in that. And I think that's certainly here to stay. Las Vegas is our home. It's a great place. And a big thing is a lot of investment is starting to come. And that's, I would say, if anything was lacking in the community more than anything, it's knowing that investment is viable. Because without capital, you don't have enough times to swing the bat. You can't build the right expertise or spend enough time on iterating.
Yeah.
And so you have to move to the tech hubs. You have to go to the Bay Area. But as more investment comes down to Las Vegas and those companies are being considered, I think that's going to be a huge lifeblood to long-term companies staying here.
Yeah, and you kind of see Vegas, like you mentioned, becoming that. It's almost always been historically hospitality. Now it's starting to get more health and tech, and I really see that as our future of the city is really in the health and tech kind of sectors. But to backtrack a little bit on the kind of the process of originally during the entrepreneurial stage, was it essentially you create the infrastructure and then you get pitched an idea, then you provide funding and then development, or is that kind of the business model that you're trying to implement, or am I a little off base there?
I think you're correct, because we have a lot of variable kind of scenarios. So in the beginning, it's just us understanding what are all the pieces to create an app, and then do we have the talent and resource and structure in place to do so. So like Dylan, for example, did most, and all the early stage stuff, and even through today, does most of the design work, or at least consults heavily at the early stages. So we obviously have a full design team, but especially in the beginning, he was doing all the UI UX design from the ground up. In terms of spinning up the business, operating it, marketing, all of that, that was my job. And then Travis in the initial time period, he was the development arm. He did full stack development. So in the initial applications, there was a degree of simplicity we had to maintain because we didn't have external capital to draw upon. So we had to be self-funded. And even to this day, our company, Wondour, has never taken a penny, and everything's been built up from scratch and from our own ideation process. So in the beginning, the three of us were everything. We were 100%. And then we started to bring in talent more and more. And we actually asked the question to ourselves, I don't know, was it maybe like a year ago, of like, okay, people ask kind of similar questions is, okay, what is your process? What makes you guys unique? And so on. And then our design team kind of spent some time thinking about it, and then they just kind of had this kind of silly aha moment where they're like, well, I think we're really just doing the scientific method, guys. Something like we all learned in elementary school. We like phrased it differently, and then we kind of looked at it and like, wait, I think, yeah, I learned this in like the 5th grade. And I think that's actually been one of our keys to success is within that process. We honestly think that could be, it kind of sounds a little cheesy, but could be the greatest invention of humanity is the scientific method and adhering to that. Like the impossible has been made possible through the rigorous pursuit of that method across science, across technology, how I'm talking into a microphone right now, air conditioning, televisions, everything that you see has been adhering in part or some manipulation of that process. And so making sure that's integrated across every individual layer, every single person is allocated time to come up with ideas. There's not a moment where, just because you're a low-level developer just working on some basic elements does not mean if you have a good idea, the best idea has to win. You have to remove your ego from absolutely everything. I'm not as good as that. It's like Dylan, my co-founder, he's very good at that to a nauseating degree. But really removing your ego, removing your kind of subjective opinion from it, following that process and making sure the absolute best idea wins every single time. It doesn't matter where the idea comes from and spending enough time to pursue those ideas. I really think in there, kind of weaving in and out of that concept is why we're successful. And we actually work with a handful of companies where we consult on that very matter. Usually kind of mid-size or corporate, larger corporations will spend a lot of time on that.
That's interesting. That's interesting to break that down. And it's hard to pull back and let the best answer or the best vision, come together, which is great. You guys have been able to do that.
Yeah, it's almost like you're a self-sustaining accelerator program, right? That's kind of a similar type of concept, or like.
Yeah, and we so like there's venture studios, which when we explain kind of what we've been doing, some people define us as like a venture studio, like more in the VC space. So. Because what we do, so we always have our own ideas that we're pursuing. So we have an idea right now. It's called VISIONAID, that is a pair of electronic glasses to help the visually impaired.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
And so that is an idea of ours where it just happened to, through our process, in the initial seeds of an idea started to blossom, and now we're pursuing that, kind of full force. That's where I'm spending a lot of my time right now. But so we always develop our own ideas. We do a fair amount of just straight agency work. So, a company comes to us, a startup comes to us, say, I need just design work, or I need just to prepare for investment. So putting together a deck and a data room, or I need everything. So soup to nuts, just give me, I have kind of we've had a fair amount of these. I have kind of an idea. I don't know if I want it to be a mobile app, what's virtual reality? And then we will be like, okay, well, we have the process for it. We're very agile in the way we work. And we just we help them. And so we help refine their idea. We give out ideas a lot that they weren't even thinking. They're like, well, actually, we think this is probably the better idea you should pursue. And they're like, of course. And then we'll design it all the way. We'll do all the technical development for it, and we'll do the support for it kind of indefinitely usually, or just straight white label work. So a lot of our projects that we work on, we can't legally talk about.
Yeah.
It's because technology companies don't want necessarily the visibility that other technology companies are helping to build their technology.
Yeah, makes sense.
But as a whole, it's quite variable. So sometimes we invest. We take equity percentages as well. So you have, you could take equity stakes. We obviously have cash compensation, residuals or royalties down the line. So if we really like the idea and we really like the founder and we think the team is amazing, we'll kind of turn into that venture studio arm and say, well, we'll invest. We'll either do this development work for free, or here's a check. Let's kind of do this path together. And we've done that quite a few times.
Oh, interesting.
That's probably one of the funnest spaces to be in, to be able to see, especially what's happening right now.
I was going to jump into multiple business opportunities. So it's like, like having overall arcing business plans, like you have subsets of business plans and individual kind of facets is interesting.
So there's been a lot of confusion, especially about this question. I'm seeing it as millions of searches a day. For your perspective, because we were talking a little bit about the metaverse, what is the metaverse to you? And how would you break that down for our listeners?
Yeah. So we get the same question a lot. I don't think there's not a perfectly clean answer, but kind of the best take is usually it's referred to in the context of like Web3 and then the metaverse. What's Web3? What's the metaverse? Are they the same? Are they different? Are they going to stick around? So the metaverse is kind of our perspective is kind of a 3D layer, an interactive layer to the internet. So it's making more immersive experiences. It's not limited to virtual reality headsets like Oculus. Augmented or mixed reality headsets are going to be part of the same thing as well. Metaverse will also take place on two-dimensional screens and displays. So it's not limited by that hardware. So kind of separate that, at least our perspective, separate that piece. So it's kind of a 3D interactive layer to the internet. And then Web3 is typically referred to as kind of the decentralized internet. as that next evolution. So you're using a lot of blockchain technologies. Not everything's just being hosted in a singular place. And so the reason the two of them get so combined is I really think they're talking about different variants of the same thing, which is the next evolution of the internet. And that's, I think, really where the sweet spot falls is the definition isn't fixed yet for either of those. It's very dynamic. It's ebbing and flowing, which makes it so exciting. And they're all pushing towards the same thing. I think it's going to be highly integrated. I mean, that's where we spend so much of our time now, is because that's the area of interest. And there's so much innovation and untapped opportunity. And I think that for the sticking power piece, a lot of people also follow up with that as well. Is this just some weird trend that's going to disappear?
And, I know you don't think. I see him shaking his head. Right. Yeah.
And we share the same perspective. It's not going anywhere, but kind of a lens that we put it through is through the lens of humanity and human nature. Is it accelerating, or is it playing into or augmenting already occurring natural human behaviors? And I think the answer to that question is a very clear yes. So take the metaverse, for example, and like virtual reality. Right now, we're looking at Zoom calls all day. It's a two-dimensional plane. We are sitting here in person right now. I'm looking at your facial patterns, your head nodding. I'm having a real sense of presence with you, and that's creating what, for me, a human conversation is. Right now, if we're limited to Zoom, it's kind of a two-dimensional plane. You don't feel like you're there. You're very much removed. Now take that.
Can you say that again?
Yeah.
No, I've always
I love it, though.
I know. No, but it's true. I know what you're saying.
And so that's so much of it is it more like human nature? Is it going to allow us to behave more like humans that we are? And I think it's going to make things more immersive. I think it allows us to have better senses of communication, better experiences that are a lot more akin to just walking around in the real world. And so I certainly think that it is here to stay. Just looking at, through all the technologies across time, people are like, oh, smartphones are, they're never going to make it, or just a cell phone. But really, it's people want to be able to communicate easily at any time. And so, looking in hindsight, a lot of these innovations that even like Steve Jobs would kind of kick down, well, they're now looked at in kind of a retrospective lens of, well, they were really just playing into human nature. So of course they're going to stick around and not go anywhere.
It's super interesting because, like you mentioned, Web3 and the metaverse, and kind of both of them, like they're similar, but in one is like it's creating an environment. The other one is like providing ownership of that created environment, right? So essentially I also get them mixed up, but that's the first time I've seen it explained that way. Like they're two kind of parallel technologies, but eventually there's going to be kind of a connection of both of those because people want to own those experiences. Where in physical life you can buy something and own it, but there's no way to do that digitally up until the decentralization.
And if you look at Meta, so they're spending $10 billion, committed to building, from Facebook now Meta, to building out the metaverse, which I think is fantastic, right? The more money being spent on their technology, I think it's
they got the money to be able to do it.
They've got the money. They'll push hardware innovation, software innovations tremendously, and they already have. But they also are a bit contrary to some definitions. So if you think the metaverse is kind of is also, people believe it should be decentralized, that no one company should own it. And so then again, perpetuating what is the metaverse, does it have to be decentralized? But really ultimately kind of like Ready Player Me type environments where, and it's also very similar to the internet. Anybody can spin up a website. Anybody can access any website from anywhere. That's going to be carrying through to these more immersive experiences.
That's very true.
With the Web 2.0, would that be considered decentralized? Because there's no one person who owns it. That's.
Yeah, I think that one's more so. Is you still have centralized servers that companies are hosting a lot of this technology in. The way people are communicating with each other, they are still kind of closed end-to-end loops, and I think that changes with Web3.
Just kind of backing up a little bit, you were talking about virtual reality, right? So like, what's your perspective on kind of like the current benefits and the risks of virtual reality?
I think virtual reality is the best.
Okay, I knew you was going to say that.
I think
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
It's just a lot of fun. I think there's, obviously there's going to be premature uses for virtual reality.
Of course,
it doesn't, just like mobile apps, not every company or every idea needs a mobile app. So same thing will go for virtual reality, but really with, I think, the Quest and the Quest 2 was the first time that the hardware really allowed the freedom and flexibility of creatives to create. So you were untethered to a computer, you have a few $100s for a device, and that to me unlocked an entire pool of developers now interested in, and millions of headsets now being sold. And so I think that was really the turning point for virtual reality in my mind. There's been research on virtual reality for 30 years. So one of the companies that we're spinning out and that we're developing ourselves is around immersive therapies, part of which utilizes virtual reality. And there's been research for 30 years suggesting that for things like mental health treatment, that virtual reality has tangible benefits even over one-on-one therapy in certain scenarios.
Yeah.
And one example within there is a you are still immersed in a sense of kind of the suspension of disbelief. So you feel like you're truly there, but you're also removed just enough where people find that honesty levels increase, that I'm more open and more willing to share things that I may not be as comfortable with sitting here directly with a person.
That's interesting.
That's just one example. Education is a huge,
I think that's going to be a huge opportunity.
yeah. And again, a lot of this is, if you look at the science, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, all these very esteemed universities are coming out with research and have been doing so for sometimes decades, suggesting the palpable benefits of utilizing virtual reality. So in education, I think they've done a fair amount of studies with like doctors, and they trained a doctor on a procedure in a traditional kind of classroom setting, and then they trained one in virtual reality. And it was some huge percentage were actually able to perform the procedure and recall the procedure out of virtual reality, and I think effectively zero out of traditional methods. And so you're able to recall, your ability to recollect the information is stronger. You have a lot of distractions that are removed. Again, it's a more human experience, and we are visual, we are human in nature, and I think virtual reality only plays to that. One of the platforms that we own, that we help to invest in and also build the tech stack for, is called VR Loop. And it's also based out of here in Las Vegas, and with offices in Japan and Korea. And they are an educational platform, effectively masterclass in VR.
Oh, wow.
And the reason that kind of idea came about was really the same. The research is very clear that from an educational perspective, virtual reality has tremendous benefits. It's incredibly immersive, distraction removed. And so I think over 1,000 or well over 1,000 custom videos have been made with masters from all over the world in 3D 360 content that's now hosted on the platform.
What's your partner? I think I know him. I met him before.
James Shu?
Yeah, I met him at Jeremy Siegel's place. Yeah, I met him before. Yeah, great guy. Yeah, I forgot he does all the masks. Yeah, he does amazing stuff with companies and athletes and all different type of stuff he does. Yeah.
Virtual reality as a whole, to recap that, I think virtual reality is here to stay. I think there's tremendous benefits. And I'm also really excited. So like facial tracking is right around the corner. So I think Meta's next headset will, but there's already some early prototypes, but you'll have eye tracking. So as I look at you, I'll be able to see eye moves. Facial tracking with internal facing cameras will be utilized. So again, just incredible advances in the hardware. Mixed reality will be a potentially even bigger market. So ThinkPack was a Google Glass, but hardware, the industry adoption have all kind of caught up. And so you're going to see a lot of those types of technologies where I can see all of you, but then I'm augmenting all of this information on top of it, creating kind of a mixed reality experience. You're seeing it already used in professional settings like welders and so on learning how to do that. But I mean, this is one of the big markets to be in. It's I mean, if you look back at, the iPhone came out. Well, you should have. Look, like hindsight's 2020, but you should have been living and breathing within that space, and it's completely transformed the way we communicate.
That's the industry where that has the most upside potential, because like you said, every asset, where if you're watching a YouTube video, now you can actually how to repair something in your car. Instead, you throw on your mixed reality glasses, and it guides you through the whole process. It's a very different experience, and I think even for people like me on a basic level, like I use it for meditating. Just really, I throw on my glasses and I go and meditate for a little bit. Like it gives you a focused experience, which is much different than just sitting in a room by myself. Like it gives you an interaction, it provides much more, I guess, retention per se, like you mentioned, where it teaches you in a different level.
It's hard to check your phone in VR, and it's hijacking two of your primary senses, and that will soon turn into things like haptics. But sight and sound. You only have so many senses to interpret the entire world. It's taking over and controlling the two that I think many would probably prioritize in a lot of ways. And they're already working on really cool advancements. And controllers already have haptics and feedback and motion, but they have even full body suits they've been working on. That's a few years away, but
that's gonna be exciting.
It's really about taking over your senses, and that's the kind of virtual reality. It's entirely virtual, simulated environment. That's really where the direction is going, and I couldn't be more excited.
You positioned perfectly to take advantage of it.
No, and I'm so excited we were able to have you come on to be able to talk, because you got your hands involved in so many different things. Like you were touching a little bit on Harvard, as I know from my understanding, you guys are doing some Harvard research development. Talk about a little bit about this. So it's an iPad-based functional age test. Is a product you guys came out with, or what exactly is that? I was trying to figure that out. So
it's called the Age Meter.
Okay.
And the Age Meter is a non-invasive, called a functional age test. And
Okay.
so it looks at the functional biomarkers that are strongly correlated with aging. So as we get older, basically performance materially changes in these.
Yeah.
So it's like audio reaction time, lung function, visual reaction time. So when was the last time you went into a doctor and they measured, okay, when you see something, how quickly can you convert that to a muscle response? Or when you hear something, how quickly can you convert that to a muscle response? Or
It's never happened.
or memory tests. There's short-term memory, there's spatial memory. There's a vast array of clear science that supports that these are strongly correlated with aging, but it's never something that's a solution available to the end consumer or a doctor. And so we worked. The company is under Centers for Age Control, but a founder out of here in Las Vegas as well. We paired up and built out the tech stack and did all the design work for it. And you go in, right now the version is you go into your doctor, it takes maybe 20 minutes, and you go through, take all these various tests. Sometimes we use peripherals like Bluetooth connected devices, medical devices, to take all these metrics. We then compare that against our own database, as well as what the research says, to say if you are a 50-year-old male, on each one of the biomarkers we measured, how are you pacing relative to what we would expect? So are you at the 50 percentile? All is good. Are you doing really well? And then we aggregate that as well into a general functional age. So your body is functioning like a 40-year-old, not a 50-year-old. And so
That's pretty cool.
And that's the premise. And on the Harvard side, it's one of our advisors is Dr. George Church, and he helps to lead Harvard's AIDS research department, along with Dr. Sinclair. Both, I recommend looking up their work. They are true leaders in like the anti-aging or age reversal industry, and they're helping to be the pioneers there. I think like Sinclair's been on Joe Rogan and stuff, and they both have an age meter sitting in their office that's being used. And it's because there's kind of this big gap of, well, you can take some blood and run a bunch of tests, but when you throw your leg out of the bed in the morning, like, how am I feeling?
Yeah.
Like, I have no test for it. So, and we're definitely bringing, right now we're going through, we're
Throw
about
my back out for real. Yeah.
and so those are the things that we're interested in there, is kind of the non-invasive pieces, and then try to extend that. We're going through a fundraising round right now, and the intent of that is to be able to develop out a lot of the new measurements methodologies for the end consumer in a mobile application, and a lot of passive tracking. So using things like the Oura Ring, Apple Watch, anything we kind of get our hands on, as well as just being able to take consistent measurements over time, gamify them a lot more, so that effectively you have all of this data about you that you're collecting all the time. So if you see all of a sudden your memory is starting to tank, then that can be an early indicator in ways others can't, that you may have something, may have Alzheimer's, early set Alzheimer's. And so it's about first developing the tool by which to measure, and then put that in the hands of the research that we're doing and researchers around the world, to help people live longer, happier, healthier. So that's
awesome.
Yeah,
That's
that's
that
pretty
project.
You guys are doing some really cool stuff, man. I gotta come to your office, just sit, like be a fly on the wall, just learn. That's pretty cool. Since we're a business show, what do you wish you would have known, when you basically first started your business compared to now?
Well, obviously the easy answer is all the information I've acquired.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially being an information
good
tech
answer.
company.
There's a lot I've learned. One big thing is first thing, I think, kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier, that scientific method, the prioritizing innovation. It's something we've kind of always done, but making sure that's concrete across everything that we've done. I think spinning wheels on, in terms of people, this is kind of one, is we've worked, because we only have so much bandwidth and kind of emotional and physical and cognitive energy to work on any one project. And Dylan and I especially put so much of on every project that we have, we put so much of our effort into, especially the early stages, to give them the best opportunity of success and put the perfect team around them, that there have definitely been those founders that we've encountered over the years where the idea just is flawed, or their reception to change is limited and capped. And those, for me personally, and again, my team may have a completely different response, I think for me is learning to identify that early and make clear decisions to remove yourself from those scenarios and say no. We've always said no to projects that we just think are bad. If we think somebody comes to us with an idea that just isn't going to work in the marketplace, obviously I'm sure there's a check. Somebody says, here's $100 million, go do it. Well, I can be flexible. But for the most part, if a small company is putting everything they have into it and their life savings into something, we want to make sure it has a good opportunity for success. But we've put so much emotional energy and time into, I think, good ideas at its core, but the founder didn't have the perseverance, the grit, the open-mindedness, I think that's like a necessity, removing the ego as much as you can from the scenario and just diving in, that we spent a lot of time and a lot of motion, I think, on what could have been some great products and some great ideas, but we only have so much control because if we have an equity interest, it's usually a minority interest. And so they have a lot of sway in the way things are done. So I think listening to myself more so and being a lot more comfortable saying, kind of removing that from our pipeline so that we can focus really on the whole collective teams that could, that everybody stays excited about because we are constantly changing what we're doing, listening to user bases, growing and expanding. And again, egos aside, just freely innovating and creating. There's definitely a few projects in mind that, looking back, I wish I'd done
Should have to that, yeah. That's good. It's learning for sure. For business advice, can you bless our listeners with just basically for them, if they wanted to own their own business and maybe they're dealing with some adversity or maybe they're working for a corporation, they have this idea and they want to put it out, what would you share with them to maybe give them a little bump to build their own business?
Yeah, obviously. So my space is in the world of tech, and I wouldn't choose any other industry. This is just fun for me. But I think reaching out and finding incredible advisors, and the internet is amazing. Just being free of like, okay, what is your general idea? Go find people who have done it, and just pester them nicely. Watch YouTube videos. Reach out to companies and firms like Wondour, because like us, we're more than generous with our time for kind of new companies, whether existing companies or startups, on sharing real quickly, hey, is this a good idea or a bad idea? What are some things I should be able to, I should take into consideration? What do you see a potential roadmap for something like this being? It's amazing how freeing it is. Like you're sitting there with your whiteboard in your room and you're stuck and racking your brain over these ideas because you're living in a silo. Extending your network to other people will completely lighten your load. A singular conversation can set you free. Just 5 minutes with somebody and you're just like, first thing, they've been through it and this is absolutely where I should be focusing, or that was a complete waste of time. That, I think at the early stage, you can have all the grit in the world, but sometimes you just get stuck in your own mind.
Yeah.
And a 5-minute conversation, again, can completely reshape the way you're thinking. And then, from there, again, just lean on those same people to figure it out. You don't have to know. I cannot develop an application for you right now by myself. Okay, I cannot write the code. That's not my expertise. But I have tremendous people who I like to say are far smarter than myself. I surround myself with people, smarter and more talented than myself. And we all work towards the same goal beautifully and collectively.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great advice.
That's a great answer. Yeah, just transitioning a little bit. We always ask our guests, what's your favorite restaurant in Vegas?
What is it? It just happened. I think last week. So I have a lot, but I was beautifully surprised by a restaurant called Crust and Roux.
Oh, that's our guy. That's the Jay Sean. Yeah, that's our guy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just went there. It's in Town Square, and I just thought, okay, well, it's a kind of a pizza place.
Yeah.
I was blown away by that pizza. I just stopped the conversation. I was having a business meeting. I just stopped everything I was doing and just appreciated the crispiness of the crust. It looked like it had some Asiago or some cheese, on top of that.
That's what's up.
Just the thinness or thickness of the pizza was exactly where I wanted. Flavor profile was phenomenal.
How funny. He was just mentioning it the other day.
Jay Sean's our guy, man. He's a good guy. They're doing a lot in the hospitality space. So that's a good friend of ours from the show, and they're doing great stuff, man. And their pies are ridiculous. They're excellent. So I'm glad you brought them up.
I think I had the Sicilian, if anybody's
okay. Yeah. Well, shout out to Jay Sean and the team over there, man. It's good stuff. What else did we forget that you wanted to share that might be on your heart?
So one general thing for people in the Las Vegas community, there's more resources than ever and free talks. There's Tech Alley that's been spinning up, and that's once a month. Wondour, we host free workshops once a month where we go on, talk about various subject matters, and then we stay afterwards and just kind of talk through your ideas. So the very thing we're talking about here, because we're trying to build up the Las Vegas community. More so, it's our home, and a lot of people just need exposure to it. So we've worked with, TCL on consulting for their first ever head-mounted display.
That's what you were just talking about with TCL.
Yeah, and so we were working with their R&D team, and some feedback Dylan provided. I would define that they materially changed their direction just through, I think, 2 conversations with Dylan.
Yeah. And
this is a huge multinational company, so we have exposure to these scenarios, and they're not as scary as you think. But just understanding what's happening in the industry, seeing people who have done it. That's why we're kind of, again, lending our own time. We're always free to share and chat. So I think that's one thing if you're in Las Vegas or anywhere in the world. And then outside of that, just create and innovate. I mean, we get cheesy with it, but we really think like innovation can change the world. So as long as the equation, if you can innovate faster than problems arise, then everything will get better. And so as people look at things like artificial intelligence and the metaverse and Web3, they get apprehensive, they get scared. But I mean, the agricultural revolution, look what came from that. It's the same thing. We just have to make sure that we position ourselves where we're constantly creating innovations that are a net positive, which is why so many of our projects that Wondour's doing that are outside of the traditional studio, and even our selections of projects that we do where people come in from an agency side, immersive therapy solution. We're self-funding all the development work being done to that right now before we go out for funding, because we think there's not enough investment being done in the space, and we think we can put amazing products on the market that can help people with mental health issues and so on. So we're just throwing our time and money at it. VISIONAID, same thing. Is we've seen our first prototype with VISIONAID was put on Dylan's grandfather, and Dylan's grandfather raised him, my partner. And he could read a restaurant menu and see the whites of his wife's eyes for the first time in 2 years. Where ophthalmologists kind of were out of solutions. It's, hey, spend $15,000 on a surgery. You got a 50-50 shot it'll work. And if it works, it'll work for 6 months. Just kind of through, again, kind of that creative process, the scientific method, we kind of iterated through some ideas. And now that is getting accepted into an accelerator program. We're preparing for larger scale funding there, just because that's an area where you talk to people, you listen, and there's a tremendous amount of need, and there's a tremendous amount. I absolutely believe that you can do good and innovate and make it a profitable business at the same time. Both of those have huge upside. I think it's going to be very appealing to venture capital, but it's just pivoting and thinking and ideating in spaces where you're listening, you're hearing people's problems and issues. I'm always an advocate of that. So if anybody has an idea related to that space and health and medical and wellness and well-being, absolutely reach out. We're always happy to chat through it and share some ideas.
Yeah. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
That was
You
great.
dropped some gems, and you guys are doing some amazing space, and it's great to see a tech company like yourself in Las Vegas. So it's great. How can people reach out to you? What's your guys' social handle that they can reach out to?
So our website is wondour.com. That's WONDOUR. And then you can find us on YouTube. We have a few dozen videos. We've started pushing that a bit more. So that's youtube.com/Wondour, same spelling. Instagram, Wondour Official. And then we also have a text line where people just text us questions all the time. So 702-602-8802.
Okay, awesome.
If you text that, if you just have general questions, maybe you don't want to call us, maybe you don't want to email us, go through that. You get access to or updates on all of our free events or anything that we're hosting for free here in the Las Vegas community, and we'll answer your questions on YouTube.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Well, we're going to come check you out, man. I got to come to one of your events that you guys are doing. So it's good stuff, man. So you can check us out at thevegascert.com. And seriously, that was good stuff, man. Appreciate you, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Appreciate you guys.
That was
Thanks.
really good.